Hello, BookTube. Well, it's a bleak and barren Sunday here at Hyde Cottage, and what that means is that there are no free books in the mail. No activity at the front slot. Just having to make do all day long with the thousands and thousands of books that I already have here. And as usual, I thought I would console myself with a tag. But this tag is not usual. I was tagged by Sean the Book Maniac a long time ago. I am tagged in perpetuity on his channel. If he makes a tag, I am tagged. It's just a little thing we have. And it was originally created by Cook Read Create. It's the Reading My Country tag. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, okay, you've been reading American literature forever. You've been teaching it forever. You've been recommending it forever. This will be a snap. And it turned out not to be. I made a video. It was 31 minutes long. When I was done, I played it back just to watch it, and it was bitterly angry, and it had nothing to do with books. And so I deleted it, and I tried the tag again a day later, and it didn't work. The same thing happened. Uh, and I think it's pretty easy to tell why that happens, but I know where my mistake is. My mistake is in the very first question. So we'll do that, and I will take a left Twain at Albuquerque. Because the very first question is, what country are you going to talk about? And my answer is the United States of America. And in every previous attempt at making this video, I have followed that with a comma and then which is right now, and then we're off to the races. Then the video goes down the local well where all the kids have disappeared. That's the mistake right there. The United States of America, comma, which right now is, will ruin this tag. So question number one is, what country are you going to talk about? And my answer to that question is the United States of America, my home, which I love. And now we're going to move on to the second question. Question number two is, what is your favorite childhood book from your country? I didn't do any childhood reading unless I was absolutely forced to, and I blocked it all out. So I don't have a personal answer, but there are two other readings here that I can add that are sort of secondary and tertiary. But one of those other readings is, what is a piece of literature from the literature of your country's childhood that you can recommend? And another is a book that used to be a children's book, that used to be that kids would read it and knew it backwards and forwards. And that is my beloved Washington Irving, the sketchbook of Washington Irving, which was once upon a time absolutely de rigueur for American literature. I don't think he's taught in school anymore. I know that people don't read him for pleasure anymore, even though The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is adapted fairly regularly for the small screen and the big screen. So I don't really understand why my beloved Washington Irving has fallen out of favor, but he nevertheless has. So you might have heard of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow or Rip Van Winkle, but most people that I meet, even who are enthusiastic about American literature, have never read Washington Irving. And if they have, they've read only the sketchbook. They haven't read anything else of all the stuff that he wrote in a whole career that was designed. Well, okay, it was designed to make him money, and it did. But it was also designed semi-consciously, semi-intentionally, especially towards the end of that career, to raise the status of American letters, to show Europe that something legitimately worthwhile could happen on this side of the Atlantic. I definitely recommend Washington Irving, the sketchbook, if nothing else. And it has to be nothing else, because there's precious little else of Washington Irving that's readily reprinted, which is a terrible shame. Question number three is, what book from your country did you read in school? I have an answer to this that's probably universal. It's probably every American has had to read this in school. For all I know, every school child in most countries. And that's Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, which is a grotesquely flawed novel. And unlike what a lot of postmodern academic critics love to say, it's not its flaws that make it great. Now, its flaws just make it flawed. I don't understand why this book has achieved such canonical status when books all around it have not. For instance, I don't know why you would read Huck Finn religiously in school and not read The Pathfinder by James Fenimore Cooper. I don't know why James Fenimore Cooper, for instance, has the reputation of being a hack and Mark Twain doesn't. Part of it might have to do with Mark Twain, who took a famous shot at Fenimore Cooper in an essay called Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses that is hilarious but totally unjust. You go through that essay as a partisan of James Fenimore Cooper and you realize that Twain is guilty of at least as many of the things he accuses Fenimore Cooper of. But part of the reason that we venerate Huck Finn comes from an offhand comment that Ernest Hemingway made, like every other comment that he made, offhand or otherwise. He didn't know what he was talking about and forgot it as soon as he said it. But the American literary press is always hungry for an aphorism. And when Hemingway said all of American literature starts with one book, and that book is Huckleberry Finn, everybody latched onto it like it was the oracle at Delphi. Utterly ridiculous. It's American writers. They tend to be their own worst enemies. So Huck Finn would be my answer to this one. Question number 4 is, what book set in your favorite area of your country do you recommend? And I've been to every inch of this country, every state, every county, every park, every field, every farm, every house, every attic, every sewer. Somewhere out in the West right now, it's mid-morning, and a herd of indigenous buffalo is wallowing in the dirt. And that exact spot on the plains in Montana where they are doing that, I have stood. But if I have to pick a place, then it wouldn't be so much a place as it would be a place in time. I would pick South Boston, a neighborhood of Boston that was once upon a time intensely clannish, largely segregated, working class Irish. And hang on just a second here. Let me find out what's going on. What you doing? You all right? There you go. Let me tuck you in here. There you go. Let's pull those in. There you go. There you go. Okay. Sorry. Unavoidable when you're living with a senior citizen who's half lame. Southie. I was talking about Southie. Southie has completely changed. It is now completely gentrified. There are some parts of little pockets of it here and there that hold on with some of the local flavor, but most of it is millionaires who want a place near the water, and that's a shame. I lived there for a long time, and then I left for a long time, and then I moved back for a long time, and then I've left for a long time. I don't think I'll be moving back again because I don't think I could afford it. But the Southie of those days, the Southie of 50 years ago, was a flavorful place. It was brutal and it was ugly in a lot of ways, but it was also lovely if you knew it and loved it. And so that's the place I want to pick. And there's a book that I can recommend. I've actually held it up and recommended it on this channel before. It's This Thing Called Courage by J.G. Hayes. It's a collection of short stories, gay short stories set in Southie, which is, unless you know Southie, you won't know what a thing that is to describe. But that's the north face of Everest. Not only to be gay in the Southie of decades ago when it was simply unthinkable, but to write short stories based in that world. When I first heard of it, I thought that's not possible. You're either going to romanticize or you're going to be wrong. And the stories are incredible. They're amazingly good, spot on, with a raw emotional accuracy that just, I highly recommend if it's your cup of tea, I highly recommend the collection. Question number 5 is, what is a historical fiction book set in your country? And of course, there are millions. There are millions and millions. I love historical fiction, and I read a mountain of it. One that I want to recommend, the one that I want to recommend for this is an exception to a rule. One of the rules I've noticed for American historical fiction is that whenever anybody writes about George Washington, they annoy me. They write about a Washington who never existed. They write about a fake paper mache Washington. And the book that I want to recommend is by Christian Cameron, and it is an example of someone who doesn't do that. It's called Washington and Caesar, and the Caesar in the title is a slave, and the book is dual narrative of the events in Caesar's life and Washington's life as their lives are warped out of shape by the American Revolution. And you know, Washington was the leader of the revolution and a slave owner. So you would look at that premise and think, all right, well, this is going to be very easy. There's no low ball this isn't going to stoop for. And that doesn't happen. Instead, it's absolutely wonderful. I was expecting when I started it that I would suffer through the Washington sections in order to read the slave sections, which sounded interesting, and instead they were both really good, and they get better as they go along when they intertwine. So I don't know if Washington and Caesar is still in print, but I strongly recommend it if it sounds like you like it. And then question number 6: what is a book by an Indigenous author of your country? And I'm not looking for a fight here. I'm going to remind you of my answer to the first question. I am from the United States of America. There are no indigenous inhabitants of this country. So I'm just going to move on to the next question. Question number 7 is, what is a classic book from your country? And there are, of course, many, many American classics, but 2 that came right to mind. One of the greatest novels of the 19th century and one of the greatest novels of the 20th century. And when I thought about them, when they both sprang to mind at the same time, and when I thought about them, I realized how much they have in common, and I wonder what that is. I don't think it's me. I think if you were to poll a large audience of people, of readers, these books would place very high on the poll of people of all ages and demographics. But for the 19th century, it's Moby Dick by Herman Melville, and for the 20th century, it's Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. And both of those sprang to mind, and then I took a minute to think about how much they have in common. and most of it's bad. I mean, the one outstanding thing they have in common is that they're both incredible works of genius. But they also have lots of lots of weirder things in common. They're both slightly insane. I mean, obviously, you reading them along, it doesn't take you long in either case to realize that the author had no blue M&Ms in his bag. It's still literarily beautiful, but still. And also, they both feature minorities in the most abusive, thin-skinned, manipulative way, and hardly any, or in the case of Moby Dick, no women at all. And very insular feel to them both. So I'm not really sure. There's a thesis paper in there somewhere about whether or not there are more American classics that fit that description. But in any case, when it comes to essential American classics, if you're looking for that sort of thing and wondering what an American who's been reading American literature for a very long time has to say, Moby Dick and Gravity's Rainbow are unavoidable, and they're amazing reading experiences. So I highly recommend them both. Question number 8 is, what book from your country haven't you read but want to? If this question refers to canonical classics, then there aren't any. I've been reading for a long time, and I read a lot. There aren't any books by any canonical American author that I haven't read. There are quite a few that are off the beaten path that I've read as well. But if we broaden the question, well, then the answer is limitless. As you know, if you watch this channel, I get new books by American authors, fiction and nonfiction, all the time. I get a pile of them every day, except for bleak and barren Sundays. American writers are doing things all the time, and I can barely keep up with them. So all of those. I don't know if that counts as an answer. And question number 9 is, what are some of your favorite authors or books from your country? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Of course, the list is endless. Depending on your mood, I can go anywhere and have a favorite. I wanted to narrow things down here. I wanted originally to narrow it down to one fiction and one nonfiction, but I simply couldn't get the fiction down to one name. I simply couldn't do it. So I have 2 names to recommend. The first one is Edith Wharton, who wrote, 3 or 4 absolutely brilliant works of social satire and social observation, works that are fit to stand with anyone, anywhere. And that's amazing. And the second would be Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was a very different writer from Edith Wharton. Edith Wharton wrote some brilliant masterpieces. She also wrote a lot of stuff that isn't brilliant because she was writing it on a hand desk, on a train, for money. And Hawthorne was a very different kind of writer, all up in his head, and very, very the type that bleeds his prose. So he didn't do as much of that, almost none of that, which I think accounts for the fact that he has one of the lowest number of duds of any American author that I know of. The closest thing to a dud that I think he ever wrote was the Blithedale romance, and even there, if you read it carefully, it's amazing. So for fiction, I want to recommend those two, Edith Wharton and Nathaniel Hawthorne, who is known mostly for the Scarlet Letter and nothing else. That just drives me nuts. That just drives me nuts. And for nonfiction, I'm going to. I've indulged myself 2 times in this tag so far, not that you would notice. I'm going to indulge myself in the exact same way, 1/3 time, and recommend Samuel Eliot Morison, a Boston historian named Samuel Eliot Morison, who he's a naval historian, and wrote a huge multi-volume account of the American Navy during World War II. And that might be causing your eyes to glaze over. And I on one level, I wouldn't blame you. But the reason that I bring him up is to stress that he doesn't write like a historian, like any historian that you would be imagining from that description. And the easiest way, the way that he would have loved the most, if you didn't take his word for it, he wouldn't have liked that you wouldn't take his word for it. But the way that he would have liked the most is the way that I recommend. The way to prove that is to get one of his books. Go to the library. They'll have his biography of John Paul Jones. They'll have his biography of Christopher Columbus. Start to read it. Give him 20 pages. If he reads like any historian you've ever read, then I'll excuse you from reading him. But he doesn't, and you should. Find a book of his and read it. He's amazing. I don't know how much of him is still in print. I'm almost afraid to look and see. Probably nothing is still in print. Or maybe the Columbus volume. The multi-volume U.S. Navy history is not in print anymore. Although maybe he wrote a 1-volume recension of it called The Two Ocean War that might be. But used bookstores will have him, libraries will have him, and he's worth your acquaintance. So he's my nonfiction recommendation. And that's it. That is the Reading My Country tag done correctly. Because I didn't take a wrong turn on the first question. And all that's left for me to do is tag people. Of course, with a tag like this, you want to tag people from other countries. And a couple of the people that I have listed here from other countries, they were the first people to come to mind, but they're gone. they occasionally reappear like a flicker, like a fugitive SOS signal in a dystopian novel, and then they disappear again. Like Jason Purcell from Canada, or Jack the Bibliophile representing Australia. I would love to hear from these people. Maybe they will watch this video. Maybe they will do the Reading My Country tag. But what about Curtis for the UK? Or even more specifically, his version of Southie will, if we get really specific, will be the wild fields of Lincoln, or Lincolnshire. He just wanders endlessly. Or Britta from Germany. They have some writers in Germany, don't they? But as usual, I open the tag to anybody, maybe even especially other Americans, because our literature is vast and various, and we are a contentious people. But anyway, I'm not going to go down that route. I'm going to stop before I do. If I want to rant, I have a puppy I can rant to. But I'll stop for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.